Hi, today I'm going to talk about tips and techniques for successfully printing these custom Gloomhaven trackers on a Resin 3D printer. Hi, welcome to Gray Lightning, my video blog about making things and playing games. And this is the second in a series of 3 deep dive videos to show techniques needed to create this project, which are custom trackers for Gloomhaven. Now, this video is going to focus on special printing techniques because there's a couple things that are special about this project. One is that all the components are printed flat on the bed and they take up virtually the whole build plate of the Resin 3D printer. So there's some things that you need to know to help you get these off of that build plate without hurting either the piece or the build plate. So I'll talk about that. The reason why I'm printing flat on the build plate is because I'm also doing 2-color resin printing. The dials in the back here are printed in white and black resin. The bottom layer is white, the top layer, just the design, is in black. This sample here shows that process in flesh and gray. And the reason why I'm doing this is because these dials are spinning in the back of the piece, and this makes that surface very resilient because it's actually printed in black resin. It's not just painted. So I'm going to talk about how to do all of this in this episode. In my last video on design, we created these 3D models, STL models, for the top and for the dials that go into the tracker. The dials in particular I want to print in 2 colors of resin. I want the numbers in black on a white background. To do this, I'll have to print them flat on the build plate, and you'll see why as we get further on in this video. So I just import each of the dials. They're different. The left is different from the right. I fine-tune the size because for some reason it didn't come in perfectly round, and so I changed it to be the same dimensions in both directions. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the second dial. If possible, I want to get them both into the same print because obviously that's faster. So you can see as you drag it in, the part that shows in red is the part that's off the build plate. So you have to make sure that you get it on. But I've also learned that just because they're separate in Chai2 box, it doesn't mean they'll print separately. Sometimes they stick together. So this is the only way I've found that I can get them both on and the ability to separate them when they're printed. It's very important after you slice it to reduce the cure time on the base layers. I put it down to 30 seconds because otherwise you just cannot get it off the build plate very easily. And then by scrubbing up and down on the layers here, you can see exactly the layer where it switches from being a solid base to the numbers. I go through the same process for the top, and once again I'm just going to show here that when I make it a little bit bigger, just a little bit bigger, it gets red on the edges. That means it's too big for the build plate. So I've designed it all to fit exactly. I'm doing this one flat as well because it gives me an option to do 2 colors if I want. So I'm going to reduce the cure time once again to 30 seconds. And I'm going to look and record the level at which it changes from being solid to the design, because that's when I'm going to switch the resins. I haven't seen anyone else do this, so I wasn't really sure if it would work. So I ran my first test with just some extra resin I had, and I did the dials, and I did the dials in my original placement, which was exactly side by side on the build plate. They looked okay in Chai2 box, but in real life they stuck together. So I get to the right level here and I hit the pause button. And so this is the first time I've done this, and this is a lesson on what not to do. So I do what I always do, which is to clean the extra resin off of the build plate. And I pull it, and while I'm getting the other one on, it drips, and I just wipe it off with my gloved hand. And what I've learned is that you can have absolutely no resin under that vat because it's going to cure just like the piece above it is going to cure. And I had a very hard time getting that off without damaging my LCD screen. The good news, though, is that the idea worked. Even if these two dials stuck together, I could do two-color printing. So here's my refined technique. I wait for the right layer, I pause it, and then I'm going to actually be able to pull the build plate completely. I clean off the excess resin around it and off the plate, but I do not wipe it off of the piece itself. I leave that just the way it comes off, and I set it aside. And then meticulously cleaning up, I leave no resin anywhere. I pull that vat off, and I have the second vat ready and waiting to go in a box that's marked resin vat, don't tip, because I keep it in there to keep it in the dark so it doesn't cure, and I can keep an extra vat ready to go at any time. And then I just put it back on, I hit play again, and it prints the rest of it. In this test, I'm printing blue on white. These are all standard resins with the same cure times, the same properties. And I clean off all the extra resin. I do this to reduce the amount of resin that goes into my alcohol. A very important find was this premium 3D print removal kit that I bought on Amazon. And that long tool is the one I use to get stuff off the plate when I'm building everything flat like this. I'm using medical grade alcohol, 99%. I have it in a little tub that's big enough that the whole build plate fits in, but I never sit anything in the bottom because that's where the dissolved resin sinks to, and I never let my pieces or my plate touch it. Now I'm going to use that magic long tool to pry it off, and it comes off actually quite easily. I finish cleaning the build plate and set it aside, and then I start working on the piece. Now, one of my techniques to keep it from sitting in the bottom is I have a little plastic round cap that I put in the bottom, and I can set this piece on it and let it sit for a little while I do other stuff without touching the bottom. The Celtic design on this piece is very tight and ornate, and it really requires a lot of cleaning. I have a little nylon brush that I got in a water washable resin kit that I really like, and I just keep brushing and brushing each section of the design in a systematic way. Then I move to the first water vat and I dip it and I brush some more. And finally, I do a final rinse in my second water vat that is very clean water. I pat the excess water off of it, but I will set this aside to dry completely before I cure it. Before I do a final cure, I always use one of the rivets to test to make sure that the holes really are clean and big enough. I always do the first cure with the right side up. I do it for 6 minutes, and then I flip it over and I do another 6 minutes, and that is enough to cure this piece. And here's the final result. I'm still amazed at what I can create with my Resin 3D printer. And this technique did work great for the black and white dials. Here they are curing in another one of my curing machines. And they're beautiful, easy to read, and that color will never rub off. In my final video in this series, I'm going to show a number of different finishing techniques, including stamping with acrylic paint and gold leaf and multicolor gold leaf. So if you're interested, please subscribe to my channel. I've got lots of other great videos about Resin 3D printing.